evening or afternoon to our very esteemed speakers and guests. I'm Chen Kane, the project lead of UNIDIR Middle East Weapon of Mass Destruction Free Zone project. It's my honor to welcome you all today to our meeting, the Middle East Weapon of Mass Destruction Free Zone, reflecting on the past and looking to the future. The event today is part of the Middle East Weapon of Mass Destruction Free Zone project, which aims at promoting regional dialogue, capacity building, closing research gap, and provide ideas for next steps on the Middle East Weapon of Mass Destruction Free Zone. While the NPT review conference was postponed, unfortunately, we decided to go forward with the event that was originally planned to take place as a side event during the lunch break of the Revcon. We decided to hold it because we believe the zone topic is important enough and deserve to continue to be discussed, unrelated to the Revcon postponement even despite it. But it also means that to many of you, the event is held really late at the evening or night, and I wanted to express my appreciation for you joining us today. We do hope to be able to host you all in person when the Revcon will take place in other events. We are very fortunate to have today a very distinguished group of speakers to reflect on what we can learn from past experience and research on the zone, including those produced by UNIDIR in the last 2 years, and to explore some new ideas on the way forward. Before we start, let me go through some logistical and technical issues, while all of us are already experts in Zoom, just to make sure that all of us are on the same page. So if you do have any technical issue, please contact by email Ms. Letitia Zarkan, our event facilitator. Letitia will add her email in the chat box if she has not done it already. And please note that the meeting is recorded. We have a great event today with really excellent speakers. Ambassador Marjolijn van Dylen will deliver opening remarks, followed by a moderator discussion with Ambassador Asghar Soltanieh, Ms. Jasmine Auda, Ambassador Stephan Klement, and Dr. Patricia Lewis. This will be followed by a Q&A session. During the meeting, you will be able to provide comments or ask questions during the discussion. The question and answer chat option is in the lower part of the screen. If you click on the hand button, you will be able to unmute your microphone. You will be able to ask the question. And then when you have the opportunity to ask the question, you will have also the option to unmute your microphone and to turn on your video and ask the question. So with those that want to do that, please feel free to ask questions during the entire event. You don't need to wait until the end. So with that, it is my pleasure to welcome Ambassador Marjolijn van Dylen, the EU Special Envoy for the Non-Proliferation and Disarmament. If there is anyone that needs no introductions here, it is Ambassador van Dylen. Yet before I do that exactly, I would like to express a special thanks to Ambassador van Dylen as well as for the EU in general on their very generous support for our project. So with that, Ambassador van Dylen, in her current capacity, is the EU Special Envoy for Non-Proliferation and Disarmament, and she represents the EU in matters related to weapon of mass destruction, as well as export control in small arms and light weapons. Before her current position, she headed the Non-Proliferation, Disarmament and Nuclear Affairs Division in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Netherlands, as well as the Europe Division of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. She was Deputy Permanent Representative to the Mission of Netherlands to the UN organization in Vienna, and was posted at the Netherlands Embassy in Bucharest, and held many other distinguished positions. And if you didn't know, Ambassador van Dylen holds a master's in geophysics. And I think it, in a very unique way that happened, I'm not sure how, we have at least 4 reformed scientists as speakers today. So with that, Marjolijn, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, Chen, for that very long introduction. and good evening, good afternoon, and good morning, and maybe even good night, everyone, colleagues. And thanks very much, UNIDIR, and especially you, Chen, to invite me to open this event on the Middle East WMD-Free Zone. A big welcome to everyone, and it's really a great pleasure to have you all attending this event from around the world. So as you said, I'm at the EU Special Envoy for Disarmament and Non-Proliferation, working out of the EU's headquarters in Brussels. My department deals with all aspects of non-proliferation and disarmament, both WMD and conventional, but we also finance projects. And together with the EU member states, we prepare and run projects in support of disarmament and arms export control and non-proliferation. And one such project is the one that you and your very capable team is responsible for. So that's a bit the context from our side. Today's event is part of that project. So I want to thank UNIDIR and your team really for the excellent way in which you've been running the project and implementing it. So we're really grateful to all of you that you took it upon yourselves to implement the project. It's a challenge. And the composition of the project group itself is really proof that representatives from all areas of the region can work together and come up with new ideas. So this meeting, as you said, was originally planned as a side event for the NPT review conference that was unfortunately postponed. And we had hoped to be able to meet in person in New York and to host this event at the EU delegation, which could facilitate exchange. So this has not been possible, unfortunately, but given the high interest in the subject matter, we decided to go ahead. And I would like to encourage all participants to do as if this is an in-person meeting and try to interact with everyone in a collegial way. I hope we can do it again sometime when the review conference actually takes place. If you allow a few words on the EU's interest in promoting confidence building and dialogue on the WMD-Free Zone for the Middle East. As you know, the EU remains strongly committed to the establishment of a zone free weapons of mass destruction and their delivery systems in the Middle East, as it was set out in the 1995 resolution. And this was confirmed by the EU and the states of the Middle East and the Northern African region in the 1995 Barcelona Declaration, where we committed ourselves to the pursuit of a mutually and effectively verifiable Middle East zone free of weapons of mass destruction. The EU considers the 1995 resolution valid until its goals and objectives are achieved, in line with the NPT 2010 Review Conference Action Plan. Also, the EU maintains the view that dialogue and building confidence among stakeholders is the only sustainable way to agree on arrangements for a meaningful conference to be attended by all states of the Middle East. This should happen on the basis of arrangements freely arrived at by them, as was decided in the 2010 NPT Review Conference. This is the position that the EU has consistently presented at the UN in different fora, but we've also noted the convening of UN conferences on the establishment of a WMD-Free Zone in the Middle East, and we were encouraged by their outcome. Many discussions and meetings have taken place over the years. You can consult a timeline that UNIDIR has made, and you can see all the meetings and proposals. I think it's a fantastic resource. But in order to move forward, it is really important to reach a deeper collective understanding of the successes and failures related to previous efforts. And this could eventually allow for ideas on new avenues and proposals leading to a weapons of mass destruction free zone in the Middle East. It's clear to me that the activities of the project so far have already contributed to relevant and inclusive discussions and a better understanding of the different views amongst the stakeholders of the region. And this is exactly what we would hope to see, more dialogue based on a common reference. The good work by the researchers in your team on a shared narrative have really contributed to this, and to create more confidence and help pointing to new ways forward. And in this respect, it's really interesting to see that you're pointing to the lessons learned from the JCPOA with Iran. This is fascinating. So I'm also really pleased to have my friend and colleague, Ambassador Stephan Klement, participating as a speaker today. But let me finish by thanking all the speakers, all the participants for attending, and especially UNIDIR's team and all those that have contributed to the work. The EU continues to stand ready to support the process towards the establishment of a WMD-free zone for the Middle East. So with that short opening remarks or welcoming remarks, I'll finish here, and I'm looking forward to the discussions. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Marjolijn. And with that, it is my pleasure to introduce our 4 panelists. And I will start with Ambassador Ali Asghar Soltanieh, which has a very distinguished career. He is trained as nuclear scientist and multilateral diplomat. He has served 2 times as resident representative of Iran to the IAEA. He has been fully involved at the NPT conferences since 1982. Ambassador Soltanieh was appointed as ambassador of the Islamic Republic of Iran to the UN and other international organizations in Geneva and Vienna, and was a chief negotiator on the protocol of BWC, as well as delegate to the CD. Ambassador Soltanieh was also appointed as Secretary of the National Authority of Iran for the CWC and served as president and chairman of several international conferences and bodies. And if you thought that when retired that the amount of work that Ambassador Soltanieh has managed to accomplish reduced is not correct. Since retirement, he has been serving as senior evaluation consultant at the CTBTO, UNODC, as well as UNIDIR in Vienna. And more closer even to our heart, Ambassador Soltanieh was appointed in 2009 to serve as a member of our project reference group. I will go ahead and introduce the 3 other speakers as well, because what I want to do is after that to have a conversation rather than presentation kind of discussion. So with that, let me introduce also Ms. Jasmine Auda. Ms. Auda served until recently as the Deputy Managing Director at the Middle East Scientific Institute for Security, MESIS, in Jordan, where she led the design and development of programs that seek to address various risks to regional security in the Middle East. In her capacity at MESIS, she was also the program manager for the Regional Radiation Detection Training Center. And Ms. Auda is also a recipient of the first prize of the IAEA 2020 International Conference on Nuclear Security. It is also always a pleasure to have on a panel Dr. Patricia Lewis, who leads the International Security Program at Chatham House. Dr. Lewis previously served as Deputy Director and Scientist in Residence at the Center for Non-Proliferation Studies and was Director of UNIDIR and Vertic. She serves on Hans Blick's Weapon of Mass Destruction Commission, the advisory panel on the future priorities of the OPCW, and was an advisor to the International Commission on Nuclear Non-Proliferation and Disarmament. She received the American Physical Society Award, and she holds a PhD in nuclear physics. And last but definitely not least, it's my honor to introduce Ambassador Stephan Klement, who currently heads the EU delegation in Vienna. If you have been following the JCPOA current negotiations, you could not have missed Stephan. Before his current position, Ambassador Klement has served in various capacities, among them special advisor to the Iranian nuclear issue at the European External Action Service, head of the unit at the European Commission, assistant to the Director for International Inspections at the Director General for Energy and Transport at the European Commission, scientific advisor to the Austrian Permanent Mission to the City, and many more distinguished positions. Ambassador Klement holds a doctoral degree in international law as well as doctoral degree in physics. So with that, I'm very honored to have with us such a distinguished group. So as opposed, as I mentioned, to regular presentation and opening remarks, I would like to really dive immediately into the discussion in more of a conversation format. I will ask each of our speakers a couple of questions on current events and development and how these have impacted advancing the Middle East weapon of mass destruction idea and negotiations. So I will start with you, Ambassador Soltanieh. As you well know, the second session of the conference on the establishment of the Middle East zone free of nuclear weapons and other weapons of mass destruction was concluded just a couple of months ago in New York. The conference adopted the rules of procedures, which It was decided that all decision will be made by consensus, and a decision to create a working committee, which will hold at least 2 meetings until the next conference, and will be able also to create a subcommittee or group of experts. So Ambassador Soltanieh, what I would like to ask you is, how do you assess really the progress made during the first and second session in the November conference to date and their current status, and how do you think they will affect the NPT review conference once it convenes?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, in the name of God, the most gracious and the most merciful. At the outset, I'm obliged to express sincere appreciation for UNIDIR, for invitation, and appreciating the organizer, particularly yourself, running the project and having the honor to serve as a reference group for this project. Because all my life of working life in multilateralism, I've been following this Middle East Free Zone. Therefore, I hope I will be able also to contribute for our noble cause in this respect. To answer your question, first, of course, all of us who have been involved have been very much disappointed that the NPT has failed to fulfill the expectation and resolution, particularly of 1995, for this matter. We have had a lot of challenges, ups and downs, and of course, particularly I'm disappointed that the decision, unanimous decision of 2010 NPT conference also, which was decided to have a conference in 2012 in Helsinki, also failed. That was a very important attempt, and that could have opened a new chapter in this respect. Then finally, perhaps some colleagues thought that they should look for other alternatives. That's why the UN conference was created. Therefore, the first concern is that UN conference should not take any steps which undermine the responsibility of NPT review conferences and decisions we've made before, so that they will derail from the expectation. That is the first concern, or let's say the viewpoints that they express, that we will not go in the wrong direction. After all, of course, this is good that the whole United Nations members are now paying more attention to this. Therefore, having due attention to this issue, which sometimes have been undermined, this could consider as a positive gesture. And therefore, if the UN conference is going by having every year conference, and also, as you correctly said, the decision of the second conference to have some sort of intersessional activities, and of course, adopting the rules of procedure by consensus, this might have a positive gesture, giving the signal of the keeping momentum. If by this decision, the UN conference and the activities is trying to keep the momentum and not lose sight of the important issue of a concern of Middle East Free Zone, we can say that we can welcome this gesture. And the only thing is, of course, to see that whether those words would be turned into action. We hope that then we will not have each conference, each year, repetitive statements and no action. I hope that each steps of the conference will have some measures, practical measures, so that we will at least go towards our ultimate goal. This is very, in brief, what I can assess both conferences, the mandate, and I hope that the all countries who are active will do so. But there is one concern. If the expectation of those who proposed this UN conference, parallel to the NPT, in fact, the process, was to bring those who outsiders to the conference, then the last two conferences proves that they have failed the objective, because they have not been able to have those who were supposed to be present and show that their presence will make a change. Though, of course, there's another question. Those outside of NPT, member of the UN as a member, be present in these conferences, if they are expressing the concerns which is contrary to the very principles committed by NPT members, then we have to think twice. What are we really doing? Because the NPT members and parties to NPT have their own expectation. They have had the full commitment to the commitments under the NPT, and they don't want to derail from it from those who have decided to be outside for any reason. Therefore, I think these are the points to take into consideration to answer at this stage to your question.
Thank you, Ambassador. Dr. Lewis, let me turn to you with the same question. What is your assessment on the progress made during the first and second session of the November conferences, and how they will affect the Revcon?
Thanks, Chen. I mean, I think, given the progress that was made after the 2010 conference on the Middle East WMD-Free Zone, but the unfortunate failure in the end to hold the conference, I think it was an excellent idea to establish these conferences under the auspices of the UN General Assembly. I don't think they undermine at all the NPT review conference process. In fact, quite the opposite. I think they support that process. They keep something going. It keeps the issue alive, which otherwise might have just withered on the vine. And I think it's a really great achievement to have now established working groups and expert groups, and to really build on the consensus that they've achieved in this whole process. Now, of course, they will report to the Non-Proliferation Treaty Review Conference, and it will be taken into account. I think it's obviously up to the states, the member states, the states parties to decide whether or not this in some way goes some way to fulfilling the promises made. The longer term issue, of course, is the full participation, full regional participation of the conference and what happens next. So this is really a good mechanism for keeping the door open. Anyone can turn up and join if they wish, as Ambassador Soltanieh, I think, was hoping for, and that's this would be a very good thing. And at the same time, it doesn't allow the states that are refusing to participate, or the state that is refusing to participate, it doesn't allow them to veto the process. It doesn't give them that power. It allows states who want to move ahead to develop the issue, to develop knowledge, to keep the next generations informed as well. Goodness me, it would probably take that long. But certainly not allow the issue to just die and in the way that I think some countries would like to see.
Thank you, Patricia. And as you and as well as Ambassador Soltanieh noted, Israel and the US did not participate in the November conference. And we shared with you an upcoming UNIDIR publication, which is not out yet, so don't look for it online yet, but we promise that hopefully in a couple of months we will be able to share it with the public. But we shared with you where we commissioned 8 authors from different countries in the region to discuss perspective drivers as well as objective for Middle East weapon of mass destruction free zone. And as a practitioner who has been written extensively on the issue of the zone, when reading the essays collection, what stood out to you? What new dimension or aspects do you think this report covers that you think could shed light on promoting the zone idea as a general, given the fact that there is already a process?
You want me to address that, Chen? Yes. So yes, I read the 8 papers and also the summary paper, and I think the way in which the incentives that were looked at in terms of the security incentive, the economics incentive, and what I would call governance, I think what was called reputational incentives were really strong. And obviously there are real big security incentives in terms of regional security, the issue of terrorism, and the issue of recognition for more than one state. And I think though that we have a real problem in that nuclear weapons, though, as a disincentive, nuclear weapons are being seen as a threatening form of deterrence. And I think this is our biggest problem all the time with nuclear weapons. There's some real economic advantages that you can see that could be established in terms of energy and scientific cooperation and so on. And then there's this whole kind of legitimacy of the state and democracy, governance in terms of its domestic, regional, and international standing. I saw some other things as well. Do you want me to mention those? Yeah. So I saw that there were some common features about incentives and the way forwards, and some commonly identified issues. I think that everyone of the authors from the different countries in the region everyone was very worried about trends, the ways in which things are going, that things are not getting better, they're getting worse, if anything. That the issue of Israel's nuclear weapons capability and the issue of Iran's nuclear capabilities are important, both not only for the regions and the other countries, but also for Israel and for Iran. And it's just that they see them in quite opposite ways to each other. But nonetheless, they are important, and that's common to both. And I think that's important to note. And that I see, though, that regional security is paramount for each of the countries. It's seen differently, of course, but that's true in every region in the world. Right, even in a so-called stable region like Europe, that each country has its own view of security. It's not a one-size-fits-all anywhere. I would say as well that the issue of energy and the environment is of vital importance, and nuclear energy could be much more useful in the region, but because of this issue with nuclear weapons, I think it's really holding back through climate-friendly policies. That could be more established. And then finally, I would say that the issue of confidence building measures, trust and confidence building measures, again, there was a huge agreement that these could really assist and help. I've got some other observations on the other questions you asked about takeaways and studies, and the issue of what's missing and things like that, but I think that's probably enough for now.
Actually, let me ask you specifically about what is still missing, and then we can go back after that. If you can elaborate what you found, what you think is still missing, so really from the zone dialogue to allow it to move forward and to have a greater participation.
Yeah, so I think that one of the missing things, which keeps on coming up, and you do wonder how significant it is, but it should be mentioned, is just an agreement on what constitutes the region, and especially on Turkey. And and then there's this kind of Gulf versus the Mediterranean. And if I'm going to get personal, I think it should just stop. Let's just go with the situation that we have, and also now, of course, we have the issue of whether Palestine should be included in the negotiations. So I think that we don't want to make the best the enemy of the good. This is a real problem in the region all the time, and it seems to me that it can be quite mischievous. And then there are some, in terms of trust and confidence building measures, there are some gaps that have always confused me. One of those is the issue of border cooperation and customs cooperation in the region. And we could do an awful lot more. I did a paper on it a couple of years back. I'm happy to share it with people if they want. And I think we could do an awful lot more to build up that capacity, and at least go some way in the WMD-Free Zone to building up capacity to monitor the technologies and the materials, and reduce at least the terrorist threat from that. Medical isotopes, why haven't we been able to leverage and harness the Iranian capacity for developing medical isotopes, where there's a huge shortage of medical isotopes of the type that could be produced, and we could be doing an awful lot more that way. And also for other types of knowledge exchange in the region. And I know that there are projects that do that, but it seems to me that they are all pushed by non-governmental entities, and they're not really taken up as much at the government level as they could. And then the big gaps is that, everybody mentions chemical weapons, but nobody really wants to address the issue, despite, of course, there being huge progress at the OPCW. So in the region, this seems to me like one of those things that everybody doesn't want to really talk about, even though they're, it's the region where they've been most used recently. And then similarly, the issue of missiles and what to do about the issue of missiles, which is a big gap and is rarely addressed in the WMD-Free Zone.
Thank you. And I'm sure you will not be surprised to know that we in UNIDIR are working on both of those topics, the chemical, biological, and as well as missile. And hopefully we will publish something in the next in the next month. But thank you, Patricia. That has been very helpful and enlightening. And also, I think it's very interesting to see the aspects that you see that are very common to other regions, as well as some of the unique aspects that are relevant to the Middle East. So as noted in my introduction, both Ambassador Soltanieh as well as Ambassador Klement have been very heavily involved in both the zone as well as the JCPOA. So let me first turn to you, Ambassador Klement, and ask you, as a central negotiator of the JCPOA, and after reading our report on the verification of nuclear component of the zone, what do you think are the main lessons learned to the zone negotiators that they should be aware of when developing the verification mechanism to support the zone?
Good evening, good afternoon. Thank you very much. And first of all, thanks to you, Chen, and your colleagues from UNIDIR for organizing this event, but even more for producing all the material which was referred to and which we find very interesting, and we got good, we as EU, as Marjolijn said, we got very good value for money. And good evening to everybody else. It's a pleasure to see so many friends and colleagues at this hour. Your question, basically, I would basically accentuate three aspects which refer to the question: what can we really learn from other experiences, be it JCPOA or other, let's say, regional arrangements, if I may call it this way, in the wider sense. So one of our scholars is, what is the scope of what should be verified? So of course, on the one hand, we have different aspects of nuclear, biological, and so, but even if we focus on the nuclear, you could imagine zones having different aspects of what is prohibited, what is allowed, what is restricted, and what should be verified. So one big issue, of course, is the fuel cycle in this regard. From the JCPOA, what we have been learning in the sense, how can you in a certain way constrain the fuel cycle to a certain extent and verify it? These are voluntary agreed by Iran constraints. And I think this is the first lesson learned. And we see in the region certain aspects also in other areas. If we see, for instance, United Arab Emirates, who have basically agreed to forego the fuel cycle and to rely fully on imported fuel. Second question is, of course, the verification modalities. And if you look at JCPOA, we have on the one hand, of course, let's say the gold standard, which is safeguards agreement, additional protocol. But if you look into Annex 1 of JCPOA, there are also other additional transparency measures, as they are called, and they can set also another important precedent for regional arrangement. And I myself, coming from European Union, of course, for me, Euratom is a very important example. And also, if you study very carefully the differences between IAEA safeguards and Euratom safeguards, you will see that in some areas, Euratom safeguards go even a bit further than IAEA safeguards, and this could also inspire the role. But then the third element, which also Patricia has already been hinted at, what she called, I think, incentive and governance. Governance is key, I think, because as well as these kind of agreements may be negotiated, when you come to implementation, there will always be some kind of ambiguities, some open points, and there has to be a mechanism to address these issues. In the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, we have the Joint Commission and the sub-bodies, which are basically tasked to resolve these issues. And I think this is fundamental to give also some kind of living spirit to a zone, to have kind of a governance structure. And the governance structure, also this you also see very well in JCPOA, can not only be focused on basically verifying prohibitions. There should also be some cooperative element. In JCPOA, it's in Annex 3, which is about nuclear cooperation, but there's also a lot of economic cooperation. And here again, I would also like to draw the kind of parallel to Euratom. And Euratom, in a certain way, is a cooperative model, which was basically also originally designed mainly as a verification and confidence-seeking arrangement. And over the years, over the decades, basically the Euratom nuclear industry has become, in a certain way, so much multinationalized that even by having this kind of multinational character of the industry, this as such contributes to confidence building and transparency, because nobody alone can do any more what is necessary in order, for instance, to do fuel cycle issues or enrichment and other things. So from my perspective, these are the three aspects: scope, the verification, but also added by some regional ingredients, and governance, incentives or cooperation, however you may call it. And these are, from my view, the main lessons learned, not only from JCPOA, but from all the kind of arrangements I've been studying in over the last 20, 30 years.
Thank you so much. And you, as you know, verification is something that is very close to my heart. So I have many more questions. But before that, Ambassador Soltanieh, having read the lesson from the JCPOA essay series that we published recently, what do you find the most relevant lesson for the zone process? And are there any elements from the JCPOA you think that can directly use or adapt for a Middle East weapon of mass destruction free zone treaty? Or are there any element from the JCPOA you think that regional states should avoid? And I believe that you have a PowerPoint that you want to share. So let's wait a couple of minutes.
If I can have the PowerPoint, please. Yes.
It's up now.
Well, thank you very much. I first try to be as short as possible. Please, I seek your indulgence and your all distinguished viewers. By the way, I'm very pleased and honored to see distinguished old friends, Ambassador Klement and Patricia Lewis, and other friends, Ambassador Revcon and other friends that are joining us. Now, of course, I give the full paper, send it to you so that you will put it in the website, but I try to be very short review of trying to answer your question. Can I have the next slide, please? Okay, I have to have a short chronological process of the nuclear negotiation and implementation by Iran. I try to be very short. Of course, you know that it started from 2003 by EU3. And of course, that was the first time that Iran accepted to have a suspension of all related enrichment activities, implement additional protocol and modified code 3.1. And of course, additional constraints were followed by original agreement in Brussels and Paris. This is unfortunate. I have to say that this is the first time the notion of suspension was created, in fact, in this process, which I personally, I'm not happy about it. And also asking the IAEA to verify this commitment. Therefore, IAEA for the first time in the history was involved in verification of suspension. The suspension is not justified because according to the IAEA statute and NPT Article 4, all activities are in fact permitted for peaceful purposes and inalienable right. Therefore, the notion of suspension itself was not the right one. And the issue of the related activities without definition created a lot of problem for us when we wanted to work with IAEA. And I was, in fact, in charge and had an honor to be the head of escort team. Therefore, we had a lot of discussions with the IAEA how to implement it. And therefore, we have to bear in mind to bringing some sort of new notions can create difficulties for implementation. Then, of course, after 2.5 years, nothing happened. The EU was not able to fulfill their obligation, and we were disappointed. And therefore, we stopped the suspension of the voluntary suspension. And the important thing is that contrary to the resolution of EU, that they, in fact, in the resolutions during the suspension, they declared that the suspension is non-legally binding voluntary confidence building. When we stopped it after 2.5 years that we didn't receive any, in fact, benefit from, then they sent this issue to UN Security Council. I have, in fact, brought a lot of legal reasons, particularly 5 legal reasons that the resolution of Board of Governors and UN Security Council has and had no legal basis. I refer you to my statement in the IAEA, and you see, and nobody has been able to challenge me that those resolutions had no legal basis. Next slide, please. And then the next step was from 2006 onward. Again, Iran tried to find a way, and in fact, since EU3 said that they were not able to deliver what they were expected because the US was not on board, Then we accepted to expand the group to 5+1, so that the US, Russia, and China were added to. Therefore, this was a new process. Again, Iran showed its full commitment and goodwill to negotiate, hopefully to find a solution. But years passed, and unfortunately, the resolutions were in fact passed in UN Security Council, which was very disappointing. Then JCPOA was negotiated in 2013, 2015, adopted in fact 2015, July 14th, entered into force 16th of July. Everybody knows. Then 20 July 2015, in fact, this was in fact unfortunate that we had the resolution 2231 of UN Security Council, which had, we were supposed to just endorse JCPOA, had another appendix B, which was dealing with non-nuclear illegal, in fact, the non-nuclear issues, which were legal military activities of Iran, which I personally criticized that that was not an honest approach after the Iran's concession on JCPOA. Well, after, of course, implementation of JCPOA, we noticed that immediately, even after the entered into force, during the Obama administration, we were not, in fact, free from those sanctions. And even if some EU firms signed MOUs, but never realized because unfortunately, the sanctions and the problems and backings continued. Next slide, please. Then we had the Trump administration, unprecedented situation that he came and called every decision and agreement by his predecessor disaster, which shows, of course, anarchy in the hierarchy of the US government and governance. And therefore withdrew unilaterally from JCPOA on 8th of May 2018. And this was strange also and unfortunate. With all disregarding international multilateralism, he even called other parties of JCPOA not to, in fact, be fulfilled with the JCPOA obligation, then reimposed the sanction and executed maximum pressure policy. Of course, Iran did not yield to this sort of pressure. And of course, this was undoubtedly material breach of JCPOA and resolution, UN's resolution 2231. And of course, then there was expectation from EU3 or EU as a whole to demonstrate their ability, but they were unable to condemn US violation and to take remedy actions and compensate. And even they were not able to realize so-called mechanism instex, which was very disappointing. Therefore, Iran had 1 year of, in fact, strategic patience and didn't do anything afterward, after withdrawal, but nothing came out. Then, of course, you know that Iran had no other choice than to benefit or use the Article 26 and 36 of JCPOA for its legitimate right and took some steps. And everybody knows that. Next slide, please. Yes, then President Biden declared the determination to return to JCPOA during his election campaign, and after even he did so, but nothing has in fact happened since then as regards to US non-compliance, sanctions, and compensation of damages to Iranian nation. And even during this administration, we noticed, and everybody knows, that this maximum pressure and sanctions has continued since he took the office. Then, of course, legitimate expectation of Iranian nation are undoubtedly immediate lifting of all sanctions, guarantee of sustainability of full compliance by US, and compensation of damages since unilateral withdrawal. Then the question you might ask me, what's happening in Vienna? My answer is very simple, no comment, because I'm not in position to answer this question. I'm not involved, and due to sensitivity of the issue, I'm not going to give a comment on this matter. But I have, next slide, but I have reviewed, as you correctly said, all the papers were already proposed on the JCPOA lessons for the Middle East, And I have, therefore, very shortly, the reflection of all my analysis that I've made from the papers and proposals, whether they are applicable or not, and why. Very shortly, the JCPOA, of course, I agree that it's the manifestation of multilateral negotiation achievement in resolving complicated manufacturing crises with technical, legal, security-oriented dimensions after 12 years of political challenges. At the same time, JCPOA is a victim of non-compliance, unstable, untrustworthy policy of US, as well as incapability of EU to safeguard the multilateral deal, which is facing uncertain destiny now. With due respect for my distinguished friend, Ambassador Klement, I have to say that to highlight the EU was not able to fulfill expectation from our side, either from the original, in fact, negotiation in 2003, and this experience was repeated, although they expressed their will and showing their intention to help, but the result have so far doesn't show the expectation. JCPOA, of course, is the most robust and intrusive, unprecedented inspection in the IAEA, which is far beyond even additional protocol. And Iran has not received any benefits so far about JCPOA. On the contrary, Iran is paying price of being party, not only to NPT, of course, being committed to JCPOA. Because of course we are, and we continue to be a party to NPT, but this is unfortunate that the JCPOA has not helped at all Iranian nations. Now, the lessons learned during the decades of negotiation leading to JCPOA caused doubt that it could be considered as a successful model for Middle East Free Zone. This is a message that we can, the first lesson that we can say. Next step, please. Next slide. Now, studying all those papers that UNIDIR has done a good job presenting in workshops, and of course I congratulate all the works that you've done under this project. I thoroughly reviewed, and there are very short comments on it. JCPOA and Middle East Free Zone differ vastly in their objectives and scope. This is one important point. JCPOA objective include limiting Iran's nuclear capability under, of course, a politically motivated excuse of extending so-called breakout. The objective of the zone is to free entire Middle East region from all weapons of mass destruction and their delivery system. The objective and scope of Middle East Free Zone are thus more ambitious. This is one of a set of the fact. While JCPOA imposed limitation on Iran's nuclear program, the zone is aimed to disarm and keeping the entire region from nuclear, chemical, biological weapon and delivery system. Next slide, please. In case of JCPOA, Iran was negotiating with 7 parties outside of the region, where in case of WMD-Free Zone in Middle East, all parties are in equal footing from the region. Then the compartmentalization of the EU3 and EU-Iran's nuclear negotiation could also be applied to Middle East Free Zone due to numerous sources of conflicts. Therefore, I think that sort of decision, which was wise decision, should be applied in the Middle East also. The priority in Middle East must be WMD verifiable disarmament. This is, of course, important message, because this is a main concern in the Middle East compared to the other region of the world. The challenge is to find the right balance between objective and scope, and of course, modulating how narrow or broad they are. The other one is, one lesson from JCPOA 4 zone is that WMD issue cannot be divorced from regional political and security environment. Next slide, please. JCPOA has entrusted the IAEA for verification. In case of Middle East, assuming verification will be entrusted to relevant international organizations such as IAEA or OPCW for nuclear and chemical, there is a serious gap for biological one, because there is no organization, because as you correctly said, I was involved in the negotiation in Geneva for Biological Weapon Convention Protocol in 2002. Because of US in fact, not joining the consensus and blocking the consensus. Mr. Bolton came there and did it. Therefore, everything collapsed, and the whole documents of 10 almost years of negotiation went to archive, and we don't have such an organization to be entrusted for verification. On nuclear monitoring, safeguard, and verification, in today's political environment in the Middle East, states are unlikely to make such concession as Iran did, even in principle. This is my own personal belief. The ratification of JCTBT was raised. A ratification by 3 in the Middle East out of 8 remaining under Article 14 of CTBT will not be that crucial, since it will not have any effect on Israeli nuclear weapon already tested. Thus, no impact on Middle East Free Zone goals. The next one, emphasis on legitimate and inalienable rights of the parties to NPT for the complete fuse cycle is prerequisite for success. As you were talking about incentive, this is one of the incentives. Note that after US admitted, this is an important point, admitted past mistakes and respected Iran's inalienable right for enrichment during Obama administration, a breakthrough was made in the negotiation process. Next step. Next slide, please.
Ambassador, I'm just checking with you how far we are in the slides.
Very fast. It's almost over. I'm sorry, I'm very fast. The other issue is the mediator. During the EU3 and Iran negotiation, of course, the High Representative of EU was serving as a mediator and facilitator. In case of course, Middle East, EU may not be able to play this role since it has not been impartial. Some members of EU are close allies of Israel and assisted in nuclear weapon program and continue to provide advanced weapons. US is surely out of question for the same reason and its dark record on JCPOA. Russia and China may play a role, but as a nuclear weapon state, they might not be as effective as they should. The role of an impartial, trustful mediator and facilitator for the zone is recognized, and I think we have to look for it. The ECHR and the Gillian Geneva process failed since they were outside of umbrella of UN and totally ignored the impartiality, the inherited issue of the lack of recognition of Israel. Any intermediation has to involve the UN. This is my opinion. Next one, next slide. The other issue is criteria. The criteria for participation is the adherence to relevant treaties of NPT, CWC, and BWC. The timeline, of course, in case of Iran, some of the timelines in JCPOA, unfortunately, is 25 years, and even some cases are forever, which is not balanced, and of course, and not verifiable obligations of the others. Therefore, there is no balance there, and this is a source of course, on sustainability. Therefore, the notion of imposing indefinite constraint and limiting in the Middle East is not realistic, to tell you the truth. Restriction for defined limit time with the review mechanism, however, to also deal with the extension might fly. That might be my proposal rather than indefinite constraint. Next slide, please. The other issue is disparity, of course. We know that in the case of JCPOA, we had this issue, and in the Middle East, there is an issue of disparity because of Israel capability. And the other issue, of course, is Israel must promptly, of course, eliminate WMD, join these treaties, and put everything on the IAEA. And since there is no biological organization, depending on the negotiation of the WMD process, then there should be a mechanism of verification for biological one. Then the other issue is notion of whether the carrot and stick policy will be successful. This is, of course, absolutely wrong. It has proved that it will not work. It will not work also the Middle East. We have to look for more instead sort of carrot and stick policy or power. We should look for incentive. Next slide, please. And then, of course, I said about the incentive, therefore I just skipped that one. And the threat and pressure policy would not work as it was proved. The best proof of this assertion is absolute failure of maximum pressure policy by Trump in the case of Iran. As you notice that we didn't yield to the pressure, and even we intensified our legitimate nuclear activities. Therefore, this policy is wrong, even it is wrong to be applied to the Middle East. And as in the case of course, JCPOA, the focus on the main issues is important. We should put aside the disputable issues in the Middle East and focus on the main issue so that we can go further. And of course, I personally have said it before, this was historical mistake that the nuclear-free zone was expanded to WMD-free zone and even delivery system. And that has created the difficulty that we have not achieved our goal after decades. But anyway, we have to find a way to cope with this reality on the ground. The next one. Okay, although it seems that, of course, we have a lot of restrictions that we have said it, but I have to say that this is a question. I wonder why the countries in the Middle East should be treated differently compared with the other zones in the world, because the problem, of course, created by Israel. Why they should play, all countries in the Middle East should pay the price of the position of WMD and non-adherence of Israel to international treaties. This is, of course, a question. Of course, although Iran is imposed by so many restrictions, but I want to be fair that other countries in the region and Iran should not be, in fact, subject to so much restrictions and difficulties and limitations. The next one. Next slide, please. Conclusion. Very, very simple. This is inalienable right of every country in the Middle East to have the enrichment, even to go to 90% for peaceful purposes. And of course, Iran, unfortunately, did such a unprecedented concession with hoping the new chapter of cooperation to be open, which was not that true. Next slide, please. Yes, this is also important that, in fact, despite of the criminal act of assassination of Iranian nuclear scientists, sabotage, cyber attack, threat of military attack against nuclear facilities, advanced nuclear peaceful use activities is continued without interruption within the framework of IAEA safeguard and JCPOA. This is a reality on the ground as far as Iran is concerned. One has to take into consideration peculiarity of Middle East, which includes Israel and with its unique historical occupation and position of WMD, and the main source of insecurity, which is main obstacle for realization of WMD-free zone. The main experience and lessons learned by Iran from the JCPOA, I want to tell you very honestly, since its existence, is deception, hypocrisy by US, followed by punitive measures for Iranians to be unprecedented, to have unprecedented concession. This is, in fact, we had a concession, but we are paying the price, and we are facing punitive measures by US because of the maximum pressure. Next.
Ambassador Soltanieh, I will
this is the last slide.
Because...
Yes, I'm sorry, the last slide almost. Of course,
I needed to read the last slide because we have more speakers.
Please skip this one, and this is, of course, talking about the list of the annexes that I'm giving you the proper. This is the last slide, is glimpse of the hope. I'm concluding with a positive note that if surprisingly, the wisdom and logic are prevail in Washington, and more responsible attitude and effective performance is demonstrated by Brussels, as the result of which remedy and compensation measures, including verifiable lifting all sanctions, as well as guarantee of sustainable and sustained commitment by US are made, then a window of opportunity might be open to put the JCPOA on right track before it's too late, and then it could be used as a model for Middle East free zone. And thank you for your attention. I apologize for a little bit longer than it should be, but I tried to shrink it, but the whole paper I would submit you to put on your website and whoever is interested in. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. So one of the issues that were mentioned is really some of the events that took place before, and I think Ambassador Soltanieh and others mentioned ACRES as well as the Geneva Glion. And really, in order to create a baseline of knowledge related to the zone, UNIDIR produced 2 online tools. Ambassador Marjolijn mentioned, I think at least one of them is one is the document depository with over 400 documents related to the zone from outside, from open sources, interviews, and private collections, many of them not publicly accessible beforehand, as well as the timeline, which is an interactive online chronology with over 150 events, which map a key milestone in the history of the zone and available in the regional languages as well as English, but also Arabic, Hebrew, and Persian. So Ms. Auda, and thank you for the patient, as a practitioner in the field, what do you think are the benefits of having the document depository and the timeline? And what do you think audience could make use, which kind of audience could make use of the 2 tools, and how do you think they will benefit in their work in understanding the issue as well as promote it?
Thank you, Chen, and thank you also for the invitation to speak here today among such a distinguished panel. And I'll start by saying that I was actually genuinely excited when I heard about the launch of the depository and timeline. And I think that's because I consider myself to be a relative newcomer to the non-proliferation field. And even though it's been about a decade now, there are still a lot of fundamental issues that I've taken for granted in my understanding of the main concepts without really having felt the need or even the resources themselves to look into the provenance of these issues that have so fundamentally shaped the narrative and knowledge base for the zone. A lot of that information has kind of been handed down, I would say, through the previous generation. And even though a lot of it was based on indispensable firsthand accounts, it's really invaluable to be able to go straight to the source and have that history captured, whether we're talking about acres, negotiations, or a particularly contentious NPT review conference, or whatever it may be. And even though that information has, for the most part, been available through numerous pathways, there is a lot of convenience and practicality to having access all through one platform, which I think will go a very long way in encouraging both interest and curiosity about the zone, especially for next generation practitioners like myself. I actually started my career as an intern at the League of Arab States working on non-proliferation and disarmament in the region. And this was in 2011, and in the lead up to the conference that never was, namely the 2012 conference on the establishment of the zone. And I just remember that there was a lot of anticipation, and even though I did have a rudimentary grasp of what was happening, I know my notes at the time probably read something like Finland ? I really didn't know what Finland had to do with it or what the implications were. And it's now 10 years later that we have the depository and timeline. And I can just imagine how helpful they would have been at the time, even to somebody like me at that level, because I think that the way that the information is presented, it's highly accessible, it's easily digestible, especially for the timeline. And for the depository, which is a bit more dense, like you said, over 400 documents, every entry is still accompanied by a sort of brief summary about the main points or implications of the document. In terms of the audiences, I really don't see any constraint or limitation as to who would actually be able to benefit from these tools. If we're talking about an audience that has a stake or even just interest in the zone, I think the most obvious beneficiaries would be governmental representatives across the region that have a focus on either regional or security policy. So these can be found in foreign ministries, ministries of international cooperation, or even across various security establishments. And I think even though there are usually designated personnel that are responsible for overseeing their country's respective non-proliferation portfolios, they're not always specialists and they're not always fully aware of all of the history or dimensions or factors at play. So, whether it's negotiations about the parameters of a zone or the eventual verification of a treaty and what that would look like, having insights into how the process has evolved is critical to making further progress. And this is something that can be provided by both the timeline and depository. And of course, the benefits aren't limited to governmental stakeholders. I think there are a lot of other actors that would find utility in the online tools, including NGOs that promote awareness or understanding of these issues, other researchers or students or policymakers, and not limited to within the region either. And I also cannot stress or overstate the value of these tools for next generation practitioners and diplomats. because this is already a field that's viewed as being too inaccessible or intimidating or outdated even. And I really believe that the tools have the potential to challenge these preconceptions. Thank you.
Thank you, Jasmine. If I can just follow up on one more question, how do you think having this timeline available in the languages of the region will that really impact how the issues is perceived in the region, and how really we can, how much it can help with the capacity building, which has been one of the issues that we have been struggling in the region with?
Yeah. So like I said, I don't think that everybody that necessarily works on this issue or is tasked to overseeing this issue has the full picture. And the timeline in all the languages of the region, it provides the significant milestones from different perspectives, whether it's from a national perspective, an international perspective. And I think this is critical because we have such a multifaceted nature of the history of the zone. And there can sometimes be a tendency to zero in on the issue from a more one-dimensional perspective of a specific country or a more dominant narrative. And this isn't necessarily due to like any kind of intentional bias, but it's really an issue of access. I think that's what it comes down to. So if there's only one access or one source of information, this will obviously have an impact and limit on the perception of these issues. And I think that's what the main benefit of the timeline being available in the regional languages comes down to, that it increases that accessibility and openness. I'll also add that in addition to there already being very limited resources out there on this issue in languages other than English, that language bias is a very real thing, and that publications in non-English languages can unfortunately be viewed less favorably or even regarded as less vital to a specific discourse. And obviously this can have a specific impact on perception. So having the timeline available in all the languages of the region, I think is a very welcome positive measure that I hope will be able to make some strides in enhancing the awareness, scholarship, even, and ownership of these issues from a regional perspective. And we don't really know what a future zone will look like, or what the parameters will be, or a future governance model will be. But I think what we can all agree on is that we absolutely need to address the deficiency in regional expertise on these issues if we expect to have sustainable progress in the long run. And I think that this increased language accessibility of the timeline can hopefully contribute, even if in small part, to building that expertise over the years.
Thank you, Jasmine. I have many more questions, but for the sake of time, let me turn to some questions from our audience. As noted, when you ask a question, you will be able to unmute yourself and turn your video on. It might take a couple of seconds until we promote you practically to be able to do it. But if you have a question to a specific speaker, please note to whom. The next one in line is that I have is Piers Gordon.
Yes, thank you. Well, I think Ambassador Soltanieh, hello, it's been a while since I've seen him, has a different view, but my question is very simple, and it has to do with building confidence within the region, however it's eventually defined. Ambassador Soltanieh recognized that 3 of the states that are required to deposit their instruments of ratification to the test ban treaty have done so. But my question has to do with those that haven't. And among those, of course, Iran is one. Israel, I think, is another. And the question is, wouldn't the complete ratification, and of course, that would also have to be the United States soon, build confidence among the states in the Middle Eastern region as to being able to move further toward establishing the weapons of mass destruction free zone in the Middle East.
Are you asking that to Ambassador Soltanieh or anyone else?
It's to the panel as a whole.
Okay, and I saw Jasmine, I saw your hands up. No. Okay, Ambassador Soltanieh, do you want to comment on that?
Yes, in fact, I touch upon in my slides, but the fact is, Iran, which is against nuclear weapon, and because of the religious fatwa of our leader, everything I've said it before, I don't want to be repetitive. Therefore, we don't have any problem with the CTBT, and we are active, in fact, signatory in the CTBT. And the only thing is, of course, the security concerns and the issues that we have in the region, and also with the others of the 8 remaining who have not ratified. I once, in fact, the conference by CTBT, I suggested perhaps it is a time to have a project to review thoroughly the reasons behind that all those 8 remaining have not decided so. Then many questions which have been raised will be answered. Anyway, our concern, of course, is a security concern vis-a-vis the capability, which is a serious threat and concern. And therefore, this is an issue along with, of course, as my dear friend Gordon said, of course, the US and others are among those 8. And therefore, we are concerned that if all 8 are all together, of course, why not? Iran will do so. Therefore, as a matter of principle, we are against nuclear tests. We are against nuclear weapon. I don't see any reason why not. But as I said, there are security concerns that has created a difficulty. The last but not the least is because of our experience with the NPT, namely 20 years of manufacture crisis, the parliamentarian of Iran are having hesitations to join another disarmament treaty. That is why once in a while we have talked to parliamentarians, they have hesitating to jump into ratify CTBT unless the situation shows that now we are not anymore facing the difficulties as a result of party to NPT. I think that message, hopefully will be received by those who should. Thank you.
Anyone else from the panelists want to address the idea of a CTBT? Patricia.
Yeah, I mean, just really to echo what I think will be said by everybody, that yes, of course, it would be fantastic if everyone joined the CTBT. There's no doubt about it. I think, though, until the US and China do, everyone will hide behind them. So that's the problem we've got.
Thank you. Our next person in line is Paul.
Hello, thank you for the opportunity to ask what seems to me a rather important question, but I haven't heard it addressed. A Middle East zone would have to be verifiable, and I guess that would also involve the ability to attribute and to enforce. There seem to be major structural difficulties in doing that in the international community. Most obviously encountered over chemical weapons, but the problem of biologicals has been mentioned. We don't know, it's not even attempted on biologicals. So given that we cannot deal with really very serious problems, allegations or perhaps evidence of breaking WMD treaties in Syria, in southern England, in Siberia, and we have a leading edge organization, the OPCW, which I have a lot of time for, I worked on, it's dear to my heart, which seems to be totally stalemated by these disputes. What is the secret in solving this for a putative Middle East zone? Is there a better alternative architecture? Is there a way of saving this diplomatic and legal architecture that we've got used to? If there isn't a better design, what is to be done? How are countries going to sign up to, in a very rough neighborhood, a great deal of distrust, how are they going to be induced to sign up to something that cannot be verified, attributed, or enforced? But there's been no discussion of that at all so far.
Okay, any further speaker? Ambassador Soltanieh.
Sorry, I don't want to be talkative, but this is part of my experience and life. Regarding the OPCW, and in fact, the issue is first, the instrumental use of this organization is the root cause of the mistrust and not being as effective as it should be. First of all, US and Russia did not fulfill their obligation under the CWC to destroy even after 10 years and 5 years extension. Therefore, has created a serious difficulty that, for God's sakes, what is the utility of this CWC? And this is an issue I don't want to deal more. I think those experts know what I'm talking about. Second point, Syria joining in fact, from Middle East, the CWC, this should have been warmly welcomed, that this was the biggest steps towards universality. And for your information, I had an honor to be appointed as advisor and helping Syria for implementation of CWC after the Syria decided to. And therefore, I was there for more offer to help them to fully implement the CWC. I was in The Hague also. But rather than using this, in fact, opportunity, unique historical opportunity, welcome those who are joining it, they created a political situation in OPCW, and you know a lot. I am not going to take time now, and they're creating a destructive, in fact, environment in OPCW, and some precedents of decisions and measures which has a long-term consequences for this organization. Therefore, this is the answer to question which was raised. We have to be careful not to let instrumental use of international organizations and multilateralism. Thank you.
Thank you. Ambassador Stephan Klement.
Yeah, thank you very much for giving me the floor. And I try to be brief. Of course, frankly speaking, at this point, there is no perfect answer to this question, but for sure the answer is not, it's on the one hand, of course, in analyzing past failure, but one has to move ahead, I think. And the only conceptual framework which I, from a personal basis, would foresee, it has to be structured along some, as we said earlier, some good governance mechanism, and there has to be some kind of challenge system where basic countries could agree upon to have certain incidents, if I may say so, followed up by some multinational inspection force. I think this is the only way to go. And if you speak about regional systems, I think one of the key lessons learned is in regional systems, while of course they can orientate themselves by the existing global organizations, but they will not be able to solve the regional challenges without having any regional component or any regional structure in place. And I think this is the way to go. And of course, one should learn from mistakes made on the global scale. But I think the solution has to be in a region, even if it looks from current perspective, we speak about the Middle East as a highly challenging endeavor. Thank you.
Thank you. Patricia, I see your hand.
Yes, just to build on what Stephan said, I mean, I think that there is no perfect solution. There's no 100% that's true for everybody. And in a paper written many decades ago by myself and Nabeel Fahmy, we proposed that there be a regional organization for the verification purposes and implementation more generally, that they could call on the existing mechanisms at the international level, but they would also have the right to be able to conduct certain activities by themselves, which of course would be part of a negotiation. But it seemed to me that that would be important, particularly as you said on the bio side. But you know, it's we ought to revisit the bio side, oughtn't we? I guess, more generally in the international arena.
Thank you. So with regard to that, actually, Ambassador Klement, I'm going to read several questions that I got from the audience that did not want to ask them by themselves. So one is, will a more ambitious project like a nuclear weapon-free zone be easier to verify than a complicated arrangement such as is the JCPOA, or not necessarily in practice?
Thank you. That's a very interesting question, if I may say so. And of course, it's impossible to answer because it will depend, of course, on the kind of structure and content of the zone to be verified. Taking into account the current situation in the Middle East with all the tensions and all the suspicions, I'm pretty sure if ever there will be such a zone, it will be a very, very, how to say, will be very, very developed and have a high degree of sophistication. And this is why, of course, also the verification system will have to be very developed and will definitely have to go beyond what we know at the moment on the global organization like the IAEA. So yes, in principle, taking into account the political realities, I guess it will be much more difficult to verify. But I think the JCPOA has already a quite complicated and extensive verification system, and it's a good signpost, I think, into the direction of such a verification system which will be needed. And of course, it will all be more complex because it will have to cover not only the nuclear, but also all the other aspects, like as we mentioned, chemical, biological, maybe also delivery means.
Thank you. We have another questions from the audience. Do you envision that regional states will propose or consider to include economic exclusive zones and or high seas with the area of application of the weapon of mass destruction free zone? And I guess Ambassador Soltanieh, I guess you might have some thought about that, maybe.
Well, I prefer the others will give, and then I may have a complementary point, please.
I think, Patricia, you had some thought, like you wrote about a lot about some of the obligations, so you might have some guesses what regional state might consider or not.
Yes, I guess so. I mean, you know, in terms of obligations, it's, I mean, the most important thing, it seems to me, is that the obligations apply equally across the board, and that they don't undermine international law that exists, so that they are never less than international law that exists, if that's any help.
Thank you. With that, let me ask our next person to ask the question will be Mohammed Al-Masrani from the Permanent Mission of Egypt in New York.
Thank you for giving me the floor. Very quickly, for the sake of time, I just have a very quick comment in terms of what was raised about the process of the conference. I can assure you that the conference has no conflict with the process of the NPT. Actually, the decision establishing the conference re-emphasize the process of the NPT and 1995 resolution, and we don't think there is any kind of conflict. Actually, it's the same process, and the conference is implementing the action plan of 2010 and 1995 resolution. So there is no conflict in this regard. And in terms of the scope, as it was raised by Dr. Patricia, actually, I would like to explain or clarify that these rules of procedure, actually, they define very clearly the scope of the free zone, and they actually, it was also defined by the decision establishing the conference itself. So I think this is one of the clear points that were defined by the decision and by the rules of procedure adopted by the second session. In terms of the issue of verification, actually, I fully understand there are several points to be raised in this regard, and as member states, our states parties, we have to consider different details and different aspects in this regard. To be honest with you, the second session mainly focused, as it was mentioned, on giving momentum and establishing or adopting the rules of procedure as a first step to give a strong basis for a momentum for the conference. We raised during the conference in our closed sessions some of the issues, including the verification, of course. There were different ideas in this regard. As you all know, there are different positions between member states in terms of the safeguard agreements and in terms of the additional protocol. We fully respect all the positions of different states parties. However, we will still continue to discuss all such details during our coming sessions and during the working committee, of course. And as it was rightly raised, there are different, we are here dealing not only with nuclear weapons, we are dealing with chemical and biological weapons. And in this regard, I think one of the aspects that will be dealt with during the coming period in terms of verification, whether we will have one regime or we will have different regime, for example, in this regard. So these are all good points raised in this regard, and of course, we are looking forward to cooperate with UNIDIR and different organizations who are willing to assist in this regard. But let us say that this second session was a strong momentum for this process, which comes to an implementation of the 1995 resolution. And in this regard, we are looking forward for the coming working committee and the third session in this regard. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And next I have Ambassador Wael El-Assad, our in-house senior fellow.
Hello, everybody. It's good to see old friends again. Patricia, Ambassador Soltanieh, Ambassador Stephan, and the rest, of course. Did I by mistake raise my hand or ask a question? I had no intention of speaking. I was enjoying listening for once, not speaking. But as long as you have asked me to say something, I think we all need to move in such meetings away from the history. The history is well known now, and maybe focus a little bit more on what could be done for future action. It's always easy to discuss the history and what happened and how things are moving, but what are we going to do about two issues? The lack of expertise in the region, if ever this zone materializes. And the second thing, how can we make it inclusive, bring Israel into the meetings? And these are very difficult questions. Some of us in the region are working now on ideas regarding mapping the region on capacity building needs, on how to make cooperation among the different parties easier, how to have serious regional ownership of the issue as well. Of course, all these things require support from the international community, serious support, not lip service support to some of the issues. Especially, if I may be a little bit provocative, the EU. The EU position, which we heard today, we have been hearing for a very long time. It's consistent. It's the same. But there has to be better thinking than just saying we support the zone based on freely arrived at measures, which is used to excuse the Israeli position of not joining in. We need also support in the region on issues regarding how to move forward. There is not enough knowledge, as Jasmine mentioned, and it's a very long process. The issue is not going to go away from the international agenda. It's going to be there in the review process, in the conference on the zone every year. There is slight movement when it comes to the conference in the last the two conferences that were held. There is slight movement. We are now working intersessionally, trying to clarify to all the states the issues regarding verification, the issues regarding should we have one regime for verification or different regimes, what kind of treaty do we need, what kind of cooperation, further cooperation the treaty can provide for the region. And I think there are signs that many countries in the region are now trying to better coordinate among themselves when it comes to this particular issue, at least. And hopefully they will manage to do that, especially and I'll be a little bit blunt here, especially when it comes to Iran and the Arab states. If they can manage to set aside some of the major differences between them and work hard on this issue, move forward, maybe that would be an incentive for Israel to not leave its chair empty and join in at one point. Basically, there is slight movement forward, but very slow, and hopefully the international community, entities like the EU, can provide the necessary support that we require in the region to move forward. That's basically what I wanted to say. And because we need to focus more on new, innovative ideas of what can we do to move forward. Looking back at the history alone will not solve our issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Al. And because we're already out of time, I will add one more question and then open to anyone that wants to answer Wael's question, as well as the next question that I have, which was for one of the viewers. Thanks to all. Question to Ambassador Soltanieh. Do you think, and others, do you think the BWC draft protocol embodied on the composite text, which several states objected to when it was launched, will address the verification needs of the region? And ask, as it seems more focused on strategic large-scale biological weapon programs. So with that, let me have anyone that wants to comment either on Wael's question as well as on the question related to the biological weapon in general and the draft protocol in particular. Ambassador Soltanieh, I see that you had raised your hand.
I am very happy to see distinguished friend Ambassador Wael Assad. I have to remind all that during the process in 2012, when we wanted to Helsinki process, it was in fact our initiative, my initiative, and with a letter from then Foreign Minister of Iran, Dr. Saleh, I took a letter to the Secretary General of Arab League to Cairo, and when while Ambassador Assad was in charge. And this message was very clear. Iran is going to fully cooperate with Arab League in the line for realization of Middle East Free Zone. And this was historical event. For 1 year, he knows very well, we were very closely working together. Therefore, I fully agree with him that Iran and Arab countries should cooperate with each other. And for the last 3-4 years, going to Jordan meeting, I have in fact reflected in my personal capacity and also reflecting the position of Iran, that Iran is ready to fully cooperate with Arab countries in the area of exchanging and reflection of our experience, as it was said in this session also about radioisotopes and others, under the auspices of IAEA, to fully cooperate with all Arab scientists in the region, so that we in fact taken steps towards full cooperation, scientific cooperation between Iran and Arab countries, so that it will in fact take a right step towards ultimate goal. Regarding, of course, the other issue which was raised, also I can give a comment at the later stage if you want on the issue that you were raised, but after perhaps the comments of the others, so that I will complement the issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Patricia?
Thank you. I know I'll be very quick. One of the things that I was asked to do with papers, and it's to build on what Wael said, great to see you too, Wael, is the issue of what needs to be studied further. And I thought maybe the issue of scientific cooperation and codes of conduct, which may address the second issue as well. And also to study other forms of deterrence that might change thinking in the region. What is possible here? And then the other thing I think that needs more work is the impact of the Abraham Accords and how that might feature going forward. I know there have been studies, but it might help to do some more on those. It seems to me that you know, the game has changed over the last few years in many respects, and we need to think about that.
Thank you, Patricia. Anyone else want to discuss the question, Ambassador Stephan, Klement?
Thank you very much, and pleasure to see Ambassador Wael Al-Assad, my old friend here. And I very much would like to echo what you think. Only by looking at the past, we will not move forward. So we have to look at opportunities in the present and extrapolate to the future. As to the role of the EU, and here I want to be really brief, we have had several activities in initiatives to support the process to develop a WMD-free zone in the Middle East over the past 2 decades. One of the projects, which is already maybe a while ago, more than 10 years, I would say, was even addressing one of the concerns which has been raised here today, namely to develop more expertise in the region. But by no means I would say that enough has been done. More can be done. For sure. And some things which, when I'm speaking about opportunities, I mean, there are many opportunities at the moment. I think they should be explored. We see some increasing interest, for instance, for the development of nuclear energy in the region. And this, of course, invites very much to look at the issue of nuclear safety, emergency preparedness. These are by sui generis areas where only cooperation can help. We know that many countries in the region have set up fantastic systems on a national level, for instance, for emergency preparedness. But these systems, without information from outside, without the necessary contacts to other regulators in other countries, they're not very effective. So I think this is an opportunity which has to be used. The EU has some activities in this area. We have been carrying out stress tests for some nuclear power plants in the region, be it under construction, be it being planned in the future. So this is an area where more focus can be developed in the near-term future. And also, of course, there's a lot of ideas about scientific cooperation. The EU is an important actor in the Horizon program to encourage also scientific cooperation in the research and innovation areas. So I think just to give a kind of a few appetizers here, I would say the EU has been an active player, and we have been always promoting a zone. But it's understood that also practical work is needed. And while, of course, I fully agree that these conferences and workshops, all this is very important. But what is even equally important is to do concrete things and to bring people together who work together in established contexts. I think this is my kind of conviction. Also, maybe some may believe this naive. Of course, it is a long-term project. And if you look once again to my region, Euratom in the 50s, when it was created, I think the situation in Europe was not an, one of confidence, on the contrary. And since then, Euratom has really developed into something which has a lot of power and a lot of synergies. And the same one could imagine in the longer term also for the Middle East. Thank you.
Thank you. And I must admit that the European example has been inspiration to us all, at least in the way that how relations can be transformed over time and a lot of efforts. And the other part that I want to mention is obviously the CRBN network that the EU created, which there MESIS that Jasmine has been working before, was the point of contact in the Middle East, the main point of contact in the Middle East for, and especially with related to emergency preparedness as well as capacity building, and has contributed a lot for the region. So we want to thank you for that. So with that, since we are already 10 minutes late, I want to thank all our speakers, participants, and especially our Middle East colleagues that it is already deep into the night, your time. The Middle East Weapon of Mass Destruction Free Zone will continue to feature during the NPT review conferences, as well as the November conferences, process, and other forums. So we hope we provided the negotiators, as well as some delegates of this forum, some useful food for thought. We will continue to work on these issues and are privileged to have a range of such partners and experts joining our forces with us. In this regard, I would like again to thank the EU and the panelists and everyone who joined us today and participated in this discussion. Thank you. Thank you very much.